An the night Chaidh Shesgets a tree, h-Alba chraoladh Fyfe Robertson, agus skip a camera from the BBC, of yacht chimichalath chuid dh'eileanan in year h-Alba, mar farsta hurus schon an tre television tonight. Program nugur The Call of the Isles. Van tre adishach tonight at Ulamach of BBC a hun, at cúgad a seach agus Shesgets a cóig, agus a skip a gwal biachgad imach cúsbad, bígad sin outrum nyo tomadach. Agus am prògram a hagin gaibh noch na jo esimplar edd y nasineach dy sgialach gyn y chwna sin. Va a void sin gymor mar farst yn y prògram agus Fyfe Robertson chraoladh edd bord bata agus a gys cymar a bwrin do ian va chwr na mara. Ha torgan y chwnig Fyfe Robertson has the egin in you. Hyla tehen stala Eilean gyda'n as a hast cwdrmach dog economy in Eilean. Maf Eilean Staffa, Ianach Giolas a va agus a ha a talig loch turis. Seo ulam is de iacha amach go Chaidh na Eilean in year, Barraigh, Vatersay agus Bhatarsaigh. Colach vis an la in you, va seich Eilean Vatersay cúcalach, agus a chlawn na falla vig in a blontiag a vaga chaidh, agus na sadja fallav a schon an chuid adjachí. Na viachsin va seo a fagal Bhatarsaigh, na Eilean le ginalach Chaidh. Saunad skippe a prògram a vigin hianach a fecin in Eilean man a haie new, agus a nadaf slói fasc a ddyníide ag roa an Norsan. Le causa dyn hadishad cúlish Bhatarsaigh agus Bhatarsaigh ha cthianach slói na Eilean seo a vachgach gymór. Le h-Alba Eilean Staffa, Barraigh, Bhatarsaigh agus Bhatarsaigh, seo tonight, The Call of the Isles.
In crowded Britain, where would you go to find the strangest, most romantic and least known of the places that delight the traveller in search of space and solitude? North, of course, to Scotland. Then westwards, over the sea, into a different world, lovely and sad, the far lands of the Celtic twilight.
Yes, tonight's off to sea. There's our ensign flying on the motor yacht St. Ebba, 19 tons with a skipper and a crew of 2, including, mark you, a cook. And where do you think I'm bound for out of West Loch Tarba? I'm off on a cruise of the Inner and Outer Hebrides. Just think of it, cruising around the Western Isles and never a chore to do. It's the kind of thing people ashore dream about when they're feeling that life and civilization have got them by the short hairs. Out there to the north and the west lie islands whose mere names make a nostalgic song.
Islay and Jura, Gheat, Colonsay and Oronsay, Mull and Iona, and the small isles with the funny Norse names, Rum, Egg, Canna, Muck. And beyond them Tiree and Cole, and further out across the formidable Minch, the chain of islands called the Long Island, that's to say Barra, Benbecula, South and North Uist, Harris and the Lewes, Britain's northwestern outposts, with nothing between them and America but 2,000 miles of blue water.
Back there at this very minute, because it's barely 8 o'clock in the morning, millions of clock-bound slaves have already started work, or they'll be swallowing burnt toast or cramming into tube trains, or waiting at suburban bus stops to start another spell of dull routine. What a day to begin a dream cruise. Blue sea and blue sky and just enough wind to ruffle the surface. And what an air! Man, you can't breathe stuff like this every day.
For 3 glorious weeks, I'll have nothing to do for hours on end but watch the seagulls slicing through 3 dimensions with such marvelous ease, and the sunlight dancing on the waves, and the brown and purple hills sliding by. Away from it all, the crowds, the traffic jams, the noise, and the frustrations of civilized life. I can't wait till we reach open water at last. Well, we reached open water, and brother, was it open. Right now, without waiting for the minch, I can give you a very considered opinion. The ideal craft to cruise in is a vessel of around 95,000 tons, with improved stabilizers and your own private suite.
A life on the ocean wave, a home on the rolling deep, where the scattered waters rave and the winds their revels keep. Like an eagle caged I pine on this dull unchanging shore. Oh, give me the flashing brine, the spray and the tempest roar.
A life on the ocean wave, a home on the rolling deep, where the scattered waters rave and the winds their revels keep.
The winds, the winds, the winds their revels keep.
The winds, the winds, the winds their revels keep.
Living with 7 other men in a 19-tonner makes you pine for the solitude of a football crowd. Did I imply that the Hebridean air was fresh? That was an understatement. There's an awful lot of it, and this morning it's in a hurry. You've got to take steps about that because it's got company, salt spray. If I could spare a hand right now, I'd take my hat off to the Royal Navy and the Merchant Navy and the men who catch our breakfast fish. This is a converted motor fishing vessel. A stout ship this, and everything trim and shipshape, at least above deck. And the wheelhouse is always interesting when you can get into it.
Oh. Well now, time to take over.
Robbie, yes. Course is 320.
320, I'll remember that, but don't go too far away, you know. Steering a ship makes driving a car seem child's play. Everything's clumsier, and there's so many things to look after here. First thing that surprised me was the large amount of wheel turn you need to get a little ship turn, but perhaps that's a good idea. Got to keep an eye on your engine revolution counter here. This lights up to show you the position of your rudder. The throttle, that's simple enough, but look at this great clumsy clutch here. But that's nothing to the fuss and bother of navigating a ship. That's really a full-time job.
But I've got to be fair. When the wind drops to force 2 and we're in the shelter of the islands and the sea reflects the blue of the sky and the hills are bathed in soft sunshine, this is the life. Between harbours on a day like this, time seems unimportant and there isn't a care in the world.
The little island we're approaching now is Staffa. It lies just west of Mull, between Iona and the Tresnis Isles, and it's uninhabited. Until towards the close of the 18th century, this remarkable little island was known only to a few Hebridean fishermen. Now, in the season, steamers bring hundreds of tourists from Oban to visit the island's famous caves, but especially Fingal's Cave, the one on the right there.
The most spectacular view of the famous cave and its approaches is one denied to the steamer tourists, including poor Wordsworth. He should have come as I have, on the sea. This is what Turner painted. This is what inspired Mendelssohn to write the Fingal's Cave music of his Hebridean suite. When winter gales send Atlantic rollers crashing down on tiny Staffa, sea and foam surge up to the very roof here, and the whole island is drenched in sea spray. That must be quite a sight, but this is good enough for me. If you sail southward from Staffa, you come at last to a gentler island, where even the wind, if the direction is right, blows nostalgia. This is Eilean, the most southern island of the Inner Hebrides. Anybody would like this green, grassy, pleasant place, but the Treasury loves it, reserving for this place and its 4,000 inhabitants a very special, tender affection. The very name Eilean warms the hearts of inland revenue men, just as, no doubt, on occasions, Eilean's chief product warms their innards, because this is Whisky Island. The 7 distilleries in the place, this one of them behind me, produce so much Highland malt whisky that the excise duty alone on Eilean whisky consumed in Britain amounts to at least 15 or 16 million pounds a year. And Eilean, besides, earns needed foreign currency by exporting a unique beverage, if I may use so humdrum a word, that goes very happily down throats of every colour in every clime. This is the raw material of all Eilean and Highland malt whiskies, malted barley. The moistened grain is spread on the malting floor, where in 8 to 12 days with frequent turnings it germinates and sends out tiny roots. During germination, the starch of the grain undergoes chemical changes. Whisky can be made from malted or unmalted barley, or maize, or rye, or a mixture of these. But Eilean and Highland malt whisky is made only from malted barley. Now comes an operation which is a key process in the making of Highland and of Irish whiskies, because this is where these whiskies get their distinctive flavour. A tawny, smoky flavour about which lovers of malt whisky can grow quite lyrical. You see, the moist malted barley has to be dried before it can be milled into a flour. So the grain is shot into this chamber and spread evenly to a depth of about 6 inches over the floor. And the floor knot
is in fact a fine-meshed metal grill. And some distance below here is a pretty hot peat fire, so hot that I can't keep my hand on the grill. The heat dries the grain, and the smoke from the peat fire percolating through the grain so that, as you see, it fills this whole chamber, gives the distinctive flavour. Now, this process had to be pretty carefully controlled for temperature, because if you dry barley too quickly, it goes flinty and it won't mill properly.
Up to a point, the process is the same as beer brewing. It's the later processes that add the potency and then, by distillation, concentrate and purify it. It goes through two stills. The first produces a spirit full of dangerous impurities, which are separated out in the second. Here are the products of the two distillations. On the left, the impure product of the first still. On the right, at last, whiskey. From this stage onwards, every operation is supervised by the resident exciseman, who alone has the keys to the many sealed locks giving access to whiskey. With thousands of gallons of whiskey around them, there's never a drop to drink for the men who make it. The whiskey goes straight into this huge tank, where it is thoroughly mixed with soft peat water to reduce it in strength. Most of the whiskey sold is at 70 proof, that is 30 under proof. This whiskey is at about 126 proof, namely 26 over proof. Long before this point, convinced total abstainers must have reflected sadly on the human labour and ingenuity that have gone to the making of this potent liquid. The exciseman takes readings after every addition of water until the whiskey is reduced to 11 over proof, when it is put into casks for maturing. By law, Scotch whiskey must be not less than 3 years old. Yes, this is powerful stuff, all right. Powerful enough, they tell me, to loosen the tacks in your shoes. So strong in its new raw state that when a pipe in the distillery burst one day, this stuff took the paint off it. By very special dispensation, arranged no doubt at a level just below Whitehall, I'm going to taste a sip, so here goes. It goes down fine, about so far, and then just about here it goes zoom. If, on the other hand, you're a lover of whiskey, especially of malt whiskey, then after this you'll treat the thing with even greater respect, if that's possible. And talking of respect, the Minch has mind, especially in the south where it's open to the Atlantic. That's what you have to cross to get from Islay, close to the mainland, to the first, the most southerly of the outer Hebrides.
Here on Barra in the outer Hebrides, you can jump two transport ages entirely, the railway age and the car age, and go straight from the ancient highway of the islands, the sea, to the world's newest highway, the air. Because this is the airstrip, the Traymore, the great beach in the northeastern corner of the island. At high tide, it's covered with water.
When the tide goes out, it leaves a great expanse of smooth, hard sand, which would make fortunes almost anywhere else, but which here is pretty much left to the cockles and BEA. But Barra's airport is notable for more than its beach airstrip. In the checkered story of what are called industrial relationships and BEA, this airport stands out as a unique example of perfect and harmonious teamwork. The closest inspection of BEA records can show not one single instance of even the simplest misunderstanding between the airstrip superintendent, the office staff, the passenger checking staff, and the radio operator. Yes, Kitty McPherson is all of them and more, and she's been running this one-woman airport, surely the only one in the world, for 10 years. Kitty's day begins 2 hours before the plane from Renfrew is due. It starts with paperwork. But early and urgent musts are a check-up on wind force and direction and an inspection of the beach. Driven by her staff of one in the fire tender, Kitty goes round the landing area to mark it out. Then she inspects every yard of it to make sure that no driftwood lies in the likely runways. It doesn't need to be a big obstacle to make trouble for a plane at touchdown speeds. Like so many of the beaches in these Hebridean islands, dazzling beaches that can be seen far out at sea on a sunny day, this one is composed of shell sand, which compacts quickly when the tide goes out. The surface is very firm, and on the landward side, it's almost dead level. Further out where the beach begins to dip gently, the sand is covered with millions of shells. This is a famous cockle beach. Kitty refuses to talk about the one blank day in 10 trouble-free years when her lovely beach, if you can blame the innocent sand, let her down. The unofficial story, an instance of the remote working of cause and effect in human affairs that somehow lightened my day, is that a small boy achieved unique small boy distinction by bogging down a plane and nearly getting it caught by the incoming tide. He had dug for bait, thus softening the sand, in the very spot where a pilot paused to run up his engines. Since then, the order has been to run up engines on the safer landward edge. An interesting instance of the ability of Homo sapiens to adjust rapidly to the environment. As 0 hour approaches, Kitty's minutes become fuller and fuller.
Yes, we have. The tide and beach are okay, and the weather okay.
She can cope with the routine stuff, but up to the very last moment, there's always the possibility of the kind of crisis that calls for fleet-footed help. Departing passengers are duly instructed. And now hold everything. Kitty's biggest moment is almost upon her. The heron circling overhead and Kitty's listening to the pilot's instructions. He's going to come in round the side of the hill, he says, right over the isolated house that was for long the home of Sir Compton Mackenzie. That plane has taken 1 hour and 3/4 to make the flight from Renfrew Airport, including a pause for refueling at Tyrie. So that 2.5 hours after leaving the crowded streets of Glasgow and the tall tenements of Clydeside, passengers can walk away from this one-woman airport over the hill at the back there into another world, the dying world of the Hebridean crofter. To the flyer, the mince is just so much distance. To the seafarer, it can be dangerous distance. The islands have seen many wrecks, but there's one immortalized in the novel and film of whiskey galore, which islanders will never forget. The ship was the SS Politician, 10,000 tons, outward bound for America. The time was February 1941, at the very worst period of the war, when the outer isles were suffering shortages of all kinds, but in particular one acute shortage, which had turned mere austerity into stark privation, to wit, a shortage of whiskey. And the cargo of the SS Politician, on an even keel and abandoned by her crew, included 50,000 cases of the finest Scotch whiskey, 12 bottles to a case, 20 Hebridean nips to a bottle. These were the basic statistics which, when the news flashed around, caused islanders to do mental calculations whose final result, expressed in what you might call functional units, almost unhinged the firmest but bone-dry Hebridean mind. The men from Eriskay, of course, had a start and they made the most of it. But in no time at all, boats of all kinds were launched with unprecedented speed into the dark from every island around. And when the vanguard of the more distant flotillas arrived, bending manfully to the springing oar or pushing engines to their utmost revolutions, They couldn't hope to get alongside. The best they could do was to tie up 3 rows out and clamber hurriedly aboard to form another gang.
You had a job to get aboard there first,
Oh?
on a swinging ladder,
Yeah.
and coming back if you were drunk, you were liable to drop into the sea,
Yeah,
or drop into your boat, which was first.
some of them were unlucky, I believe, and got caught coming ashore with the stuff.
Oh, yes. Yes. I remember one poor old man that went out along with young fellas. Oh, he would be about 80 years of age, as I'd say. And they got something like 40 cases. But they had only a rowing boat, and they had a long way to go. So on their way coming back with their haul, they saw Chaigh's boat coming after them.
Mm-hmm.
So the old man said to the young fellas, he'll give us a tow, all right, because I'm a great friend of Chaigh's. Chaidh was the ferryman, of course.
Yeah.
So the boat sheered off a bit, and he said, that's funny. He couldn't have recognized me. But all of a sudden, she sheered the other way and came alongside. But who was aboard there but the exciseman and the police? Took him in tow and took his 40 cases off him at Pullachar.
Here's the most tragic sight in the islands today. Whiskey from the politician fished up by a skin diver about a year ago and found to be quite undrinkable. Somehow oil had been forced in past the cork and stuff turned black when it was shaken up. Even this bottle, which isn't quite so bad, is really useless because only the smell's right. Out there, they tell me, there's another sunken vessel whose holds are crammed with 100-gallon casks of Jamaica rum at Navy strength. But no great hopes are entertained of a happy release there because some misguided person had fitted the ship with steel hatches. One thing emerges clearly from talks with islanders. If another whiskey ship should ever go ashore in these waters, the workings of a beneficent providence will be organized more efficiently and a lot more quietly.
But it's not likely to happen again. That was a rare bit of island luck. The sea never yields treasure easily, and least of all this sea, always difficult and often dangerous. If the weather's rough, the nearest islands can seem far too far apart. Well, it hasn't come a minute too soon for me. Don't be fooled by the woolen cap and the anorak and the weather-beaten ears. I'm not the tough seafaring type. I've always been a man with no stomach for the sea. No stomach, there's a good one for you. On the water, I'm all stomach. Yet I've had to go to sea quite often in the way of duty. I've been sick on practically everything except the canal barge, and I'm not fussy. Just put me on anything that floats, and in no time at all, it'll float lighter. On this subject, I speak with the authority of a man who's leaned out over lee rails in the North Sea, the Irish Channel, the Firth of Clyde, the English Channel, the North and South Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and the wide Pacific. And the Minch. Oh boy, the Minch, between the Inner and Outer Hebrides. Thank goodness it's behind me now. Since I joined the St. Ebba, 19 tons and all moving at once, I've enlarged my experience considerably. I can call myself now a professional. When it comes to taking some of the weight off the feet suddenly, I'm your man. In one way, you know, seasickness is like the common cold. That's to say, everybody seems to have a different remedy for it. And I've tried them all. Well, except the half pint of seawater taken quickly. I funked that one. In any case, I don't need it. On the other hand, because I like to be thorough, I did try the good drink of neat whiskey so strongly recommended by islanders. That was disastrous. I should have remembered that for islanders, the operative word, so to speak, would not be seasickness, but whiskey. This experiment, however, had one temporary advantage. I had my whiskey, briefly. Then there's the hearty, active technique, 20 smart trips round the deck. The trouble was I could never get in the 20 in time. And there's the opposite remedy, take it lying down. But for me, this method needs something else, morphia. Breathing deeply certain has a delaying action, but you must be careful to breathe very slowly out. Staying limp and letting yourself go with the boat is one thing I'll never try again. You see, you can only cheat your stomach once. They're not fools down there, you know.
There are people who are never seasick, and I don't mind as long as they're not banana eaters. I remember once making a 4-hour crossing from Nuku'alofa to another Tongan island in the Pacific with a banana eater. I had just reached the point where I was breathing deeply and keeping my eyes fixed on the horizon when this chap took out a banana and peeled it with fiendish care and suddenly shoved half of it in his mouth and started chewing. I simply had to watch him. It was like the rabbit and the snake. I watched him eating 2 bananas and a chocolate biscuit. And it shows you the kind of battle I was fighting when I tell you that he had to lick the chocolate off his fingers to finish me off. I can give you one tip that's worth more than anything you can buy in a packet. If you're not a banana eater, stay in the open air on the lee side with nothing between you and the rails. Never be caught below because you thought the sight of the sea might put you off or because it wasn't too safe on deck. Crossing the Minch, I managed to hold out for 4 hours. Here in the stern, hanging on with everything. Then, like a fool who can't leave well alone, I went below to thaw out. In 15 minutes, things had quietened down below. I'd found the remedy that works for me, at least, and here it is, tested in 3 weeks of intensive research. Stand in the open air, or better still, sit if you can sit upright without leaning against anything, and keep yourself absolutely vertical by moving against the movements of the boat. Now, this takes some doing at first, but you acquire cunning. You have to and fro to counteract pitch. You've got to left and right to counteract roll. And when you're in a cross sea and the boat corkscrews, you've got to toing and lefting and righting and throwing, or it might be vice versa. And after 4 hours of this, you don't want even a meal. No, just bed or anything horizontal and stationary.
But even the worst journey has an end. And this one ends in a place that symbolizes both the appeal and the tragedy of the Western Isles. You can see it all in the children at its isolated school. The school is at Bhatarsaigh, a little island south of Barraigh in the Outer Hebrides. It's the most westerly school in Britain, but the children coming to it this morning couldn't care less. Going to school here is in one way like going to school anywhere. It's a reluctant progress, and the world never seems as interesting as in the last few minutes before the bell rings. Like so many island schools, this is a one-teacher school. Mrs. Mackin has to cope with pupils from 5 to 11 at 7 different learning stages, and all in the same room. But this isn't the only way in which the road to learning for both parents and children is harder in the islands. When these children come to school, they can speak only Gaelic, so Mrs. Mackin has to teach the 5- and 6-year-olds in Gaelic and the rest in English, or a bit of both.
Agus
For the children, learning a new language is a difficulty which has been greatly eased by a new system introduced 2 years ago, under which the first teaching is given in Gaelic. For parents, school means the beginning of the breakup of the family, because after their 11+ examination, all these children must go on to the junior secondary school at Castlebay in Barra, and this means living in lodgings there for 5 nights a week. And for the brighter children, lodgings in Castle Bay will be followed by life in a school hostel in Inverness or Fort William until the age of 18. And in 9 cases out of 10 after that, lonely Bhatarsaigh will just be a place to come back to for holidays. All the Outer Isles know the song this boy is playing. It was written by his great-uncle, and it tells the story not only of one remote island, but of many Hebridean islands. Because it was written by a young man who, like thousands after him, had to leave his island home for the New World. The Gaelic words tell of an exile's nostalgia for the old dear life and his longing to return. Vatersay, too remote, with crofts too small, and with fishing a thing of the past as a second livelihood, is slowly dying. 10 years ago, the population here was over 150. Now it's about 90, and most of these are pensioners. They still play the old games here, and 5-year-olds and 11-year-olds play together. In an island where there is such an age gap between school children and the rest, because the missing generation has left the island, children tend to live protectively in a world of their own. In Mrs. Mackin's unguarded moments, it's still a Gaelic world.
That's a starfish now.
Oh, a starfish.
Yes, that's a starfish. See, it's still alive. See its little tentacles coming out. Off you go and put it back in the water. Isn't that good?
There'll be no nature studies in winter, I take it, Mrs. Mackin.
Not outdoors. We do all our nature study indoors.
How rough is it here in winter?
It's very rough. We have terrific gales in the winter time. Sometimes visibility is reduced to about 50 yards. We can't see across this bay at all. And the noise is terrific.
This means your school's closed a lot then in winter.
Well, the attendance is irregular. On 2 occasions this year, we had 100% absenteeism. And one evening, I couldn't let the coolest children home at all. They had to stay in the schoolhouse. It would have been dangerous to let them go through the blizzard.
Now, how much are these children slowed up in their schoolwork, do you think, by the need to learn a new language?
Well, it's difficult to say. For the last 2 years, we've started with a new approach to the teaching. You see, these children, they're Gaelic speaking. Gaelic is their mother language, as you know. So now, when they come to school, we teach the skills of reading, writing, and number through the medium of Gaelic, gradually introducing English.
I've never met such terribly shy children. You know, they'll hardly speak above a whisper to me.
That's right. I've been with them for 8 years now, and they still whisper to me. Well, I think this is because their elder brothers and sisters have to go to Castleville school at the age of 12. Now, they're brought up in a small community with a few children, the age group between 5, well, very few infants, up to 12. And the next age group is very elderly, their parents and old age pensioners. I think this is inclined to make the children very withdrawn. They keep to themselves because they have no elder children to play with.
I noticed that although the ages vary over quite a scale, you know, they all play together.
They all play together, yes, and they play very happily together. If you look at them now, you see that they're quite happy and quite free. There's no restraint at all. But if we called them over here just now, the shutters would go on.
But isn't this extreme shyness a disadvantage when they've got to cope with the bigger world?
No, I don't think so. They just seem to absorb the bigger world They go into it quite naturally. And when they go to the mainland, they seem to take it all in as a matter of course. They're very philosophical in their ways. Somehow.
Do you think they tend to, when they come back from the mainland, tend to look down a little on the simple island life?
No, they love their island. They're very happy to come back. And I think they would love to live here if there was work for them to do and if they could pass their time. They'd certainly like to spend the remaining days of their lives here.
A few more years and the little world they've grown up in, the only one they know, will have no place for them. Whether they like it or not, these children will have to make a new life on the crowded mainland or in some far country or on the seven seas. But they'll never forget the little school under the hill beside the quiet shore. And one day they'll know how the exile of long ago felt when he wrote the nostalgic song with the catching melody. Good night.